The other concern that has been raised is that given that the subject we're discussing is so sensitive and so contentious, how do we ensure that we are able to discuss this whilst being comfortable so that no one feels out of place, even if it is a Sunni brother or sister participating in these lectures? And how do we ensure that we don't make this egoic and just about us versus them or you versus me? If at the end of these lectures we've only been able to prove that the Shi'as are right and the Sunnis are wrong, then what have we accomplished? So I want to once again emphasize and stress that the purpose of these lectures is not to divide the Muslims in any way, shape or form. But there are multiple reasons for this. The first reason is to explain the Shia perspective, because even though a vast number of our Sunni brothers and sisters do not do takfir to us and do not say the Shi'as are kafir, they certainly have this concern on their minds that we have broken away from mainstream and that we do not treat the Sahaba with respect, for example. So we're trying to explain the Shia perspective from a side that would hopefully come across as common sense without requiring, a lot of proof from Shia sources. Secondly, I want to also emphasize that the purpose of and intention behind these lectures is not to convert anyone. I am not in any delusion that at the end of these lectures there will be Sunni brothers and sisters converting to Tashayyu in droves, nor do I expect that to happen. The purpose is to say that Sunnis can remain Sunnis, Shia can remain Shia, but there are certain principles that are missing in the Ummah that we need to restore. In particular, the issue of justice and how we subscribe this sense of there is nothing unjust in our past history. It is just glorious, and it's just been a golden age that we have lost and that we must now try and restore. We're simply trying to say, let us be realistic and acknowledge the mistakes that have been made and identify where we are missing important principles that we need to restore in the Ummah. And if we can agree on those, such as, for example, we must be led by leaders who have adala, then it doesn't necessarily mean everyone has to become a Shia or a Sunni. But there is a vast change in the Muslim attitude and perception, which inshallah would lead and help towards the plight of Muslims today. The third issue is that there is also this concern that can we not acknowledge that our Sunni brothers and sisters do love the Ahlul Bayt? And in fact, many of the Sufi tariqas take their origin and start from Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we are already united in terms of spirituality, in terms of akhlaq, in terms of mawadda and mahabba of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. But my concern is this, that is it sufficient to only love the Ahlul Bayt? You see, there are Hindus who love Imam al-Hussein and compose poetry of Imam al-Hussein. But does that mean it is sufficient? The problem is that loving the Ahlul Bayt is not sufficient, because we can all be inspired from the wise sayings of wise people. There are Muslims who find inspiration from the sayings of Greek philosophers. They find inspirations from the sayings of Jesus and from the Buddha and from other New Age sages as well. So it is easy to unite on that principle. But what about the aqeedah of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam? And as I alluded to it last night, that the perspective I'm trying to share is that what the Quran had intended was to put the Ahlul Bayt front and center as the guides of the Ummah after the Prophet ﷺ. But something went wrong and their importance was downplayed, and the sanctity and importance of the Sahaba, whose tathir or sanctity is not given by the Quran, was put up in place of that. And this was not the fault or a malicious attempt by the vast majority of Muslims that we call Sunni today, but it was a ploy by the few who ruled over Muslims as family dynasties, such as the Umayyads and the Abbasids.